Further debate. The member from Parkdale High Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the member from Spadina, Fort York, asked me why I decided to stand for election, I told him that all my life I'd wanted to tell stories that make a difference. Tell us about that, he said. But fellow members, do not think that my storytelling is mere entertainment. Because in his CBC Massey lectures, The Truth About Stories, Indigenous storyteller Thomas King quotes Leslie Silko and says, "Don't be fooled. Stories are all we have to ward off illness and death. You don't have anything if you don't have the stories." As a country involved in Indigenous settler truth-telling, we know what happens when stories are stolen through genocidal policies or retold in death-dealing ways. Each of us comes to Queen's Park with our story and our constituents' stories entrusted to us, and we are changed by their stories, and I hope that we are changed by the stories we share with one another in the House. Today, I will share my story, and the story of the much-loved riding of Parkdale High Park, where I grew up. But before that story is told, we must acknowledge a more ancient story. Mes amis, nous qui sommes réunis aujourd'hui reconnaissent la nature secrète de cette terre sur laquelle vivent des humains depuis 15 000 ans. Elle est le territoire des Premières Nations de Huron-Wendat et des Petuns ainsi que de Seneca et plus récemment de Mississauga de Rivière-Credit. Le territoire fait l'objet de la ceinture wampum, faisant référence au concept d'une boule avec une seule cuillère entre la Confédération Iroquois et Ojibwe et les nations alliées, convenant de partager et préserver pacifiquement les ressources sur tout le pourtour des Grands Lacs. Aujourd'hui, le lieu de rassemblement de Toronto est encore l'endroit où habitent les nombres d'Autochtones de l'île aux Tortues. Et nous sommes reconnaissants d'avoir l'occasion de travailler au sein de la communauté de ce territoire. I want to thank my French immersion school teachers from Howard Park Public School for the gift of fluency. And I also want to acknowledge my special ed teacher, Madame Pinard, who took this failing student from nightly tears of frustration to being on the Humberside Collegiate Honor Roll. Teachers, school administrators, school board trustees, you were there when I needed you most, and here I am now, amplifying your call for publicly funded education that leaves no student behind. I know what life is like without publicly funded schools, social programming, and infrastructure. For 3 years, until the age of 5, I lived in a rural village in India. Imagine no running water, no electricity, no schools. My parents believed in the Christian story that says we find our lives, we find our meaning, our purpose when we lay it down in service for others. And for 3 years, they were part of an organization that built wells and schools and electricity lines in Maliwata and other small villages. Returning to Canada, my eyes were trained to see the global disparity and recognize it here, too. We can tell a story of scarcity, that only those with bootstraps to pull on will win at life, or we can tell a truer story, that abundance in community is found in the paradox of giving your life away in service for the common good. That is what I believe we in this House are called to do. Believing that stories were transformational, I began working life as an actor. The arts, you see, are a passion of mine, and most of my family makes their living in music, theater, visual arts. But as I began working in film and television, I realized that some producers aimed not to change lives with their stories, but to sell beer during the commercials. And I had a vocational crisis, which led me into ministry in the United Church of Canada. It was just at that same moment that the Reverend Dr. Sherry DeNovo was taking her seat in this House, tabling important legislation that would protect our 2S LGBTQ siblings. And I carry on the Parkdale High Park human rights legacy started by Sherry, with whom I share a dedicated passion to 2S LGBTQ justice, and my trailblazing predecessor, Butila Karpoche, the first Tibetan elected to office in all of North America. Just last week, Speaker, I met with the Regional Tibetan Youth Congress, and I am proud to be the MPP for the largest Tibetan community outside of Tibet and its surrounding areas right in our riding. I'm thrilled to announce that we are bringing back the Ontario Parliamentary Friends of Tibet Summer Youth Program to Queen's Park, a program begun by the former MPP Karpoche. Now, Parkdale is sometimes called the landing strip, a home for many newly arrived residents, Caribbean, Indian, Vietnamese, Filipino, Tamil, Chinese, Hungarian, Roma. And west of Parkdale is Roncesvalles, the home to many Polish friends and family, and still further west of that is Bloor West, where many Ukrainians first settled. Parkdale High Park is also the birthplace of the very first business improvement area in all of Canada. Bloor West Village BIA was established in 1970. Local businesses and BIAs continue to play an essential role in shaping the vibrant communities in our riding. And every resident with their stories is part of a long tradition of human beings finding their home at the place where the Humber River and Lake Ontario kiss. It's the place the Indigenous people call Kabetanong, which means leave the canoe and go back, because the river was a portage, route that took you from Lake Ontario to Lake Simcoe. And just a little further up that river, the place that the settlers call Babby Point was a cut of land that breaks into the river like a knife. Diago was the local Indigenous name for that spot. I only know a few Indigenous words, so I was very excited to learn that the Ontario Legislature offers training to its new MPPs in Canada's official languages, and I requested to have instruction in Anishinaabe, the local Indigenous language from my riding. Sadly, we do not yet pay for MPPs to learn Indigenous languages. Note the word yet. My constituent, Michael Thunderbird, co-chair of the NDP Indigenous Peoples Committee, recently asked, "What does truth and reconciliation mean to me?" It means that there is a debt to be paid. Reconciliation and reparations to be made. On one side of my family, we are sixth generation of settlers. My great-great-grandfather, to my knowledge, the only other politician in our family ever, was actually an MP under Sir Wilfrid Laurier, and then senator in York. He lived on Annette Street in the riding that I now serve, and was a wonderful grandfather to my grandmother. She spoke of his kindness and his generosity, but he governed at a time when women did not have the right to vote. What would he make of me, a woman speaking before you now? He governed during the time of the Indian Act and the Chinese head tax. And as we, my friends here, spill ink into Hansards that will be judged by our descendants, whose stories are still missing from these halls? Whose stories are still missing from these halls? When I hear the government say it will burn through the ring of fire territory, expediting processes that take decades into months, I hear the echoes of colonialism. Without full, free, prior, informed consent, without consideration of generations to come, without the rights of the earth and its creatures at the forefront, we dishonor the trust placed in us, and we risk telling another Canadian horror story. There are many voices that I would like to bring to you today from over the years. But the ones that cry out the most today to me are my unhoused friends. During my time as the minister at Windermere United and at St. Luke's United, which was across the street from the Allen Gardens encampment, I became known as the Reverend with a passion for housing. I did memorials for people we lost way too soon to addiction, suicide, murder. One of those stories was Nelson's. Nelson lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Swansea near Bloor West until he had a work injury. And when he couldn't pay the rent, he lived in his car, and then in my living room, and then in a shelter. And when his car was repossessed, he lost his low-paying job. I missed a call from Nelson one day, and when I called him back, there was no answer. 10 days later, his son was in my office, and we were choosing which of his teddy bears to put in his father's coffin. I never got to do Nelson's house blessing, but I did his funeral. And years later, I would find myself working with members of the Black community, and I want to lift up the Crisis in Our City network and the African Canadian Collective, and we were trying to find shelter for the African refugees from Toronto when the shelters were full to them and the Canadian Ontario housing benefit was all dried up. Some of them waited weeks sleeping on our sidewalks. Some of them died. I'm here, Mr. Speaker, the stories of my constituents, to make sure that our government prioritizes the vulnerable and shores up the safety net through which my friends fell through. My own family, especially our 5 children, have taught me so much about autism, childhood trauma, family shelters, children's aid, foster care, and adoption. And I stand here today for my stay-at-home spouse, Adrian, and for every parent who has filled in the holes of our social safety net with their own safety plans, homeschooling curriculums, and suicide watches. I'm proud to fight for the families who have hung on by the skin of their teeth, waiting months, sometimes years, for the mental health and the special needs support to come, and who have been forced to innovate when that help never came. Parkdale High Park has shown me what a community means. During the pandemic, we launched the Neighbors Helping Neighbors Mutual Aid Network. We fed thousands, delivered masks, offered care. We created programs like Stone Soup, founded by Windermere United and the residents of the Swansea Mews Toronto Community Housing, where local businesses gave generously to neighbors in need. These are a testament to the spirit of the people in Parkdale High Park. In the east end of the riding, organizations like Brian's Place and Parkdale Community Food Bank and the West Neighborhood Center and My Brother's Keeper do life-saving work. Parkdale Queen West runs the only supervised consumption site in Toronto that was not ordered closed. As someone who has lost friends to the toxic drug crisis and was the minister at a church that offered harm reduction, I add my voices to those who say we must listen to the experts, not ideology. We must stop criminalizing the addicted, the unhoused, and the poor. I want to share one final story with you about a small church of about 35 on a Sunday, a brave family of Roma human rights activists, and an octogenarian rabble-rouser by the name of Mary Jo Letty, who pulled us all together. Mary Jo is a companion of the Order of Canada for her work with refugees at Romero House. And one day she called me saying, "Please, Alexa, I have a family in need of sanctuary." Now, church sanctuary is an ancient tradition. It's not protected by law. It was practiced in the Middle Ages. It was practiced during Nazi Germany when the Jews were being persecuted. It's being practiced in the United States of America right now as Christians shelter the unstatused migrants in their churches, refusing to surrender them to the authorities. And Mary Jo asked my church to take in a young couple with their 5-year-old child, human rights advocates from Eastern Europe who had survived an assassination attempt by neo-Nazis. A negligent lawyer had mishandled their case, and like so many others, they were forced and facing deportation and death. And here is what the little church of Windermere United in Bloor West did. 50 congregants stared down the Harper government, knowing they risked $50,000 in fines and 2 years in jail. The Basumas lived in my office, and I moved into the toddler room for 1.5 years. And they were cared for and they were fed by the people of Parkdale High Park. And when the government changed, finally, the family who had fought for the rights of others was finally granted freedom and asylum in Canada. And it was a powerful reminder, such a powerful reminder, Mr. Speaker, of the ways in which our laws must be tested and changed when they uphold unjust systems instead of giving life to people. Members, this is but a snapshot of my beloved Parkdale High Park, a place of courage, resilience, community, a place of parklands and homes and businesses where humans and deers and coyotes and savanna oaks and community gardens nourish body and soul. And I want to take a moment to thank the people and teams who were writers in the last few months of this story. To the people of Parkdale High Park who put your trust in me and gave me your vote, thank you. To our riding association led by Jason Wagger, our campaign team led by Francis Kung, thank you for our tireless work together. To my dedicated staff of Marshall Woodward, Sarah Frame, Somo Chimi, and Matthew Gurr, thank you for your belief and your brilliance. To my family, my beloved spouse Adrian, our children Bailey, Sandra, Terry, Jacob, and Quinton, you have my heart. And to Ian and Brenda, my parents, Ramona, Louise, Ellery, and Sasha, your unwavering support has lifted me to this place here. To my colleagues, congratulations on you all winning your seats. To our new speaker who made her story, may we do our work well for the people in this house and beyond. And let us remember this. The stories we choose to tell in this house, the ones we choose to hear and ignore, will build the future. Let them be stories of healing justice, inclusive hope, and mutual prosperity. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Questions? The member from Aurora, Newmarket, please.
Thank you, Speaker. Alors, tout d'abord, je voudrais bien vous remercier pour votre discours aujourd'hui et félicitations dans votre élection. Et j'ai bien remarqué que vous parlez français, donc c'est pour ça que je voudrais bien demander une question en français. Donc, peut-être une histoire en français. Pourquoi vous avez appris le français? Est-ce qu'il y avait quelque chose dans votre vie où vous pensez, oh, c'est la culture, la langue, je ne sais pas quoi. Peut-être que vous pouvez nous donner une histoire dans la langue française. Merci.
Response?
Merci pour la question. Oui, moi, quand j'avais 2 ans, mes parents ont travaillé en Belgique et moi, j'étais dans une garderie, une crèche, un petit enfant, et là, j'ai pris le français pour la première fois. Après ça, on a traversé en Inde, et j'habitais là pour 3 ans. Quand j'ai retourné ici au Canada, mes parents ont décidé de mettre leurs 2 petites filles en français immersion. Et c'est comme ça que je suis ici et je parle français avec vous maintenant.
Question? The member from Toronto, Danforth.
Thank you, Speaker, and my congratulations to the new member on an excellent inaugural speech. You talked about housing, and as you're well aware, there are a variety of areas where one can focus in housing. Could you speak a bit to us about where you want to focus when we discuss the whole issue of housing in this legislature?
Response?
Thank you for that question. Yes, we need a full spectrum of housing, but my own expertise and experience of the last few years has been to work part-time as a church minister, part-time in a community engagement firm that was working with the City of Toronto on shelter, on deeply affordable housing, on safe consumption sites. And so what I've seen is a real lack in the affordable housing sector. I also see a tremendous opportunity in that sector for the government to get involved, get people working, building housing of all kinds, but in particular, the deeply affordable housing. We have a housing crisis like no other. We're seeing people more and more who can't afford to pay their rent, who are now becoming unhoused. There was a woman in my riding who I met and said, I can't believe this. I've grown up here my whole life, and I'm being moved out because they've just raised my rent to $2,000. So affordable housing, yes, but also real rent control is a key. And housing that is the rental stock is another piece of that. So thank you for that.
Question? The member from Nepean? Don Valley North.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, I'd first like to say congratulations to the honourable member from Parkdale High Park. You mentioned about how you came from the United Church and that you were a minister there. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more about how you'll take your skills of ministering to your spiritual flock, now taking those skills to minister to your constituents, and how you're going to serve them similarly. Thank you.
Response?
That's a lovely question. When I was an actor and I became a minister, I thought, oh, shoot, all these skills that I built up for years of knowing where your light is and how to speak to the camera and in front of people are all gone. And I discovered that on Sunday morning I was doing that every single time, making stories, making meaning. And so I similarly wonder, like, how do these gifts and skills translate? But then I was at the doors, and I'm sure each and every one of you knows, it's a mini pastoral moment. where they hand you their heartbreaks and their hopes, and you take it in and you're Rolodexing through your mind, what's mine to do? How can I help? How can I bring this and change this and help this individual? And so it feels to me like an extension of the work of the community organizing work, of the pastoral piece, making sure that people's needs are cared for. And I think what's really important that I'm taking with this is that it takes more than grocery carts to feed the soul. There is the human piece that we need as well. Yeah.
Question? The member from Essex.
I want to thank you, Speaker. I want to congratulate the member for taking her chair in this assembly, and we look forward to having constructive debate and discussion with her. I tried to do a Google search of the grandmother's grandfather to find out who was this ancestor of the member, and maybe she would like to elaborate on this. Who was this politician who served under Wilfrid Laurier? I'd be interested in knowing who that was and what that person was about. And if she can't offer us that information, then I invite her to offer us information about the Stone Soup Network.
Response?
Oh, you've given me such a dilemma. I'll let you all look up Stone Soup Network because that's more easily found. Senator Archibald Weir Campbell came over. His parents came over from Scotland, and he settled first north of the city, and eventually made his way to what is now the Junction. And he owned the Campbell Flour Mill, which was instrumental, small businesses are, you know, in making that neighborhood thrive, because now farmers didn't have to bring their grains all the way down to get it milled and put on trains at Union. They could do it up at the Junction. And it was that call and that led him into Parliament. And as I said, he served at the time of Sir Wilfrid Laurier, and was very much a part of the railroads. I think that was part of his portfolio at one point. And then he became a senator and passed away, I believe, though don't quote me on this, around 1913. Yeah, yes, thank you.
Question. The member from the wrong end here. Sorry, my apologies. Hamilton Centre.
Thank you, and thank you for that. That was wonderful. You mentioned that your church offered harm reduction services. Could you speak a little bit about what that experience was like for your congregants and what it meant to your community for you to take that on within your church? Thank you.
Response?
Thank you. The church that I'm speaking of now is not in my riding. It's downtown. It's St. Luke's United. And it wasn't so much about taking it on as being part of our community. On a Sunday morning, you'd see individuals that were the old families that had started that church. You'd see newcomers. You'd see refugees. You'd see people who were staying in the shelters nearby come and join us on a Sunday morning. And we, as part of our faith, have been told to care for our neighbors and to love them. And to love them means to meet them where they are, to keep them alive, and to whenever possible, reduce harm. And so the harm reduction was done in partnership with Passan, who would come every time we had a meal program. And those are folks with lived experience who are hired then to work with individuals. And quite often they would work with individuals and help move them towards treatment. But what we know, many of us, is that when you're not ready for treatment, you need the harm reduction. And when you're ready for treatment, then you can move into those spaces. So, yeah.
Question? The member from Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Thank you, Speaker, and to the member that just spoke, congratulations. That was a wonderful inaugural speech, and what a wonderful storyteller you are. I could see why you've chosen the profession that you had prior to this one. At the beginning of your speech, though, you mentioned education, both from your personal experiences, it sounds, as well, like you've had some experiences with your children as well. I just wondered if you wanted to make a few comments about what more you think we could be doing on education in this province.
Response?
Thank you for that. And while we are investing more and more in education, when you look at the cost of inflation, we're seeing that we're actually $1,500 per child less per year. And I'm seeing it. I've got 5 children. Last year, 3 teachers were on stress leave. And my one son has been waiting over a year for an assessment that he needs. So from personal experience, I'm seeing it all the time. But, in talking to those who are in the education field and the ECEs and others, we're seeing that people are burning out at a high rate, and that what we need most is the funding to support this system and our kids.